In previous episodes of Game Bytes, I've reviewed two of the three games I considered the most important to me growing up, Link's Awakening and Tomb Raider. And in today's episode, we'll take a look at that third game. Movie tie-in games typically have a rough history, especially nowadays when it seems like they've all but disappeared. But during the early generations of game consoles, movie/TV tie-in games were everywhere. From the surprisingly well-aged SpongeBob SquarePants Battle for Bikini Bottom to the infamous E.T. video game, the quality of these tie-ins varied greatly from game to game. But if you were to ask anybody from my generation which movie tie-in game was the best, 99.8% of them would likely say the Toy Story 2 game. But how well does that hold up today? My name is Lightyear to you, and in today's episode of Game Bytes, we'll be looking over the pros and cons of Toy Story 2 Buzz Lightyear to the Rescue. Before we get started, it's important to mention that we'll only be going over the console versions in today's episode. We will not be discussing the Game Boy version whatsoever. Pro number 1, the gameplay. Toy Story 2 is a 3D collectathon platformer that plays very similarly to games such as Super Mario 64 or Spyro the Dragon, only this game is loosely based off the world of Toy Story 2. I say loosely because while there are levels based on moments from the movie, such as Al's Toy Barn, Al's Pet House, and the elevator in the airport, I can't say I remember this part from the movie. There are 15 levels in Toy Story 2 divided across 5 zones with 3 levels per zone. There's 10 regular levels and 5 boss levels. In the regular levels, you're free to explore, their main objective being to collect as many Pizza Planet tokens as possible, which you'll need to collect to unlock later levels. Think of it like collecting Power Stars from Super Mario 64. There's 5 Pizza Planet tokens in every level. Collect 50 coins to give to Ham, complete a puzzle, race in a challenge, find 5 hidden characters, and defeat a boss. If you're stuck in the game, you can always talk to Rex, who'll give you hints on tokens you haven't collected yet. In the first level of every zone, Mr. Potato Head will be missing one of his parts as well. If you find it, he'll give you access to a new power-up, which are often required to reach specific tokens. These power-ups include things like a bubble shield, rocket boots, a grappling hook, etc. There'll be a few tokens where you can't get them on your first run through a level, and you'll need to return with a later power-up. While this can be a little annoying on a first playthrough when you don't know how long it'll take to unlock that power-up, it does offer a nice sense of replay value for those wanting to 100% the game. The third level of every zone is a boss fight. None of them are particularly challenging once you figure out their patterns, although I do have some less than fond memories fighting the Slime Time boss since I could never beat it by myself as a kid, which is a little silly looking back on it considering I can now beat it in like less than a minute. I won't dare spoil it here, but I gotta say, I really like the final boss in this game. While the actual enemy you fight is a little anticlimactic, the way the level is set up, especially the way the camera works, it surely is one of the many highlights of this game. Pro number 2, levels and music. The level design is pretty solid all around. You're given some very large environments to explore with plenty for you to do. Levels are pretty compact for the most part, so it shouldn't take you very long to get around these places. This works pretty well, as you'll always have something to do when you're exploring. Some levels that really stand out have to be Elevator Hop, Airport Infiltration, and Tarmac Trouble. While they're still compact for the most part, they're absolutely dwarf the other levels in terms of size. Elevator Hop in particular seems to start off at the bottom of the elevator shaft and work your way up to the top. On the topic of Elevator Hop, a minor complaint I do have about this level in particular is that Rex is in a very odd location. He's usually pretty close to the start of the level, so you'll have a good idea of where to start collecting Pizza Planet tokens, but in Elevator Hop it takes a while for you to even be able to find him. Most levels also have some pretty nice music, even if some of it isn't that memorable. My personal favorite songs are the ones that play in the construction yard, Airport Infiltration, and Tarmac Trouble. While some may have issues with the soundtrack considering Toy Story isn't exactly well known for having amazing music, this game still has some pretty great songs that often will get stuck in your head. Con number 1, 100% completion. The only real problem I have with this game is that there's not that much of a reward for completing the game 100%. The only thing you really get is an extra cutscene and Rex pointing out that he found all the pizza plant tokens. It's not that big of a problem, but it's certainly more of a journey is better than the destination kind of situation. So now let's talk about version differences. Like what we did with the Tomb Raider review, I'd like to go over some version differences and I'm not quite sure whether to label them as a pro or a con. This game was first made available on PlayStation, Nintendo 64, Sega Dreamcast, and PC. The graphics are nearly identical across all versions, although I personally think the PlayStation version looks the cleanest. The audio quality is also different across every version as well, with the Dreamcast version seemingly being the best version in terms of the cutscene audio. In terms of gameplay, I'd say the PlayStation version is the definitive edition. The Nintendo 64 version is still really fun, although the controls are slightly different, which throw me off considering I grew up on the PlayStation version. The best example I could think of is that on the PlayStation, L2 goes into first-person mode, but on N64 that's mapped to the R button. I'd never played the Dreamcast version myself, but after speaking to people who have, it seems like the Dreamcast version has slightly better audio and visuals, but the controls are really rough on that version. But again, I can't say for myself. Some more things worth mentioning about the Nintendo 64 version is that you'll need a rumble pack if you want to save your game, similar to needing a memory card on the PlayStation, but also on this version, they don't have any cutscenes taken from the actual movie itself. Rather, it has these kind of cheap-looking comic strip style cutscenes instead, and while they can be charming in their own right, it is definitely a drop in quality in terms of the cutscenes compared to the other versions of the game. If you want to play Toy Story 2 today, the PlayStation version is the one I'd recommend. Of all the versions of the game, the PlayStation is the easiest one to play on modern devices. Since the game is available to play as a PlayStation Classic, you can download on PlayStation 3, PSP, and Vita. At least I think so with PSP. I'm not quite sure if the online of that's still active, but it is available on Vita, so that's pretty nice. And even if you did have the old consoles to play on, I'd still recommend the PlayStation version, as that one's control scheme is by far the most comfortable to play with. That said, if PlayStation isn't an option for you, the Nintendo 64 and Dreamcast versions are also pretty great too. And now for the overview. Toy Story 2 Buzz Lightyear to the Rescue is still a really fun game to play that I'd gladly recommend to anyone who enjoys a good 3D platformer. You'll definitely enjoy this game more if you like the Toy Story movies, but even if you've never seen the movies, it's still a really fun movie tie-in game with lots of creativity that's oozing with that Pixar quality. That, on top of my nostalgia bias, means that we'll be giving Toy Story 2 Buzz Lightyear to the Rescue a 4.5 out of 5. Thank you for watching this episode of Game Bytes. I did do a Let's Play the Toy Story 2 video game, but that was years ago, and that Let's Play is terrible, so I would like to remake it someday. Don't know when, but I would like to do that sometime. So, instead of that terrible dumpster fire of a Let's Play, we're going to recommend one of the current ones that I'm doing on the channel, so that's pretty fun. Thank you guys so much for watching Game Bytes. We'll have a playlist on screen so you can watch more of these reviews if you'd like. I'm sure there's something in there that you'd be interested in. And until next time, need a gear to you.